Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about your future and how you can best prepare for it. I'm sure you're watching the news right now and you're thinking to yourself, with all of this stuff around AI and tech and all of that stuff there, am I best positioned to have the skills and competencies to fit the current job market? Because everyone is feeling that anxiety right now. And so it's understandable if you're not quite sure where you position yourself. Maybe you're feeling like, actually, do you know what? The current competencies and skills I have right now is going to make me redundant in some way, shape or form. Well, listen, you're in the right place as far as I'm concerned. And if you stay tuned, I'll be talking about the things that you can do to position yourself in such a way where at least that can be minimized. And of course, if you want to hear more things centered around jobs, careers, consulting and contracting, make sure to like and subscribe below. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Michael Tabirade, and I help ambitious professionals navigate through this ever-changing world and develop and create a flourishing portfolio career, a career that they can own on their terms. Now, I've been saying this quite a lot in previous videos where there are many people who have done things the right way. Okay, and it almost feels like there's a bit of a slap of the face, and then you've got situations now where AI is taking control or tech is taking control, at least creating this sense of fear where it's almost like if I don't do something now, my situation could get really bad. And so there's this over reliance and over dependency on the digital, because it feels like there's no other options out there. It's actually quite interesting. I was watching something being said by Sam Altman, the guy who created OpenAI/ChatGPT, and he was talking about the fears that he has in relation to AI, and I'm like, aren't you the guy who accelerated this? Well, of course, he has fears of his own, but the point being made is there is something or things that we can do that can prevent us from just being in perpetual fear. So I'm going to be talking about some of the challenges that we have, but also 7 key things that you need to look out for in order for you to be best prepared for your career moving forward. Now, of course, I've been talking about this quite a lot where portfolio careers are becoming the thing. They are the thing right now, i.e. the career that you create. We're seeing non-executive directors, contractors, consultants, all people doing things independently because we're moving into this gig economy. And so with that in mind, it makes sense to have some sort of checklist to help us understand if we're doing things the right way. So I've put together a contracting checklist, which you can download below. So if this is something that you're interested in, then feel free to click on the link so you can have access to that checklist. So I've got this diagram here, or this picture, and it's basically highlighting that the grounds are shifting, okay? Which means things are changing. And so what is exactly shifting? What is actually changing that is making us feel this sense of uncomfortability? Well, I've spoken about some of them already, and you can see those 3 factors there, but let me explore this in a bit more detail. I believe it's Moore's law. I think it's Moore's law, and you can pick me up on this, states that a computer's processing power doubles every 18 to 24 months. And so with that in mind, the processing speed of computer chips right now is at a point that is beyond measure, even 5 years ago, even 10 years ago. And so this speed of acceleration and innovation is causing us to go, what does this mean for humans? Like, what does this actually mean? And again, this is further illustrated by some of the data captured by the World Economic Forum, which is basically stating that there is an increasing gap between what the world will need and the actual skills that are available in the world right now. And so the question becomes, how do we fill this gap? Again, following on from this whole idea, people are feeling this frustration that the skills that got them to where they are right now aren't the same skills that are necessarily going to carry them through into the future. I'll give you a perfect example. Everyone's talking about vibe coding. Everyone's talking about AI and all of this different stuff there. That didn't exist more than 3 years ago. And the stuff that got me to where I am right now is all centered around program, project, and change management. Now, of course, that still may be relevant in some guises, but in 50 years' time, will that be a human doing that stuff? Or will there still be people like me doing this type of stuff? Some people may be quick to say, no, it definitely won't be a human, but we don't know. And that's the point that's being made here. So there is a bit of uncertainty and insecurity in terms of whether there is confidence in the competencies that have been developed over time. And this stuff has been developed over time relative to AI that's doing things in seconds and minutes. So where does that leave us? The third thing is around this whole idea of being in a VUCA environment. So volatile, uncertain, I forgot what the C and A stands for. But some say we're not in that VUCA environment anymore. It's a totally different one. And because of the consistent change in geopolitical factors, in terms of economic shifts, in terms of war, technology, etc., etc. It's almost like, where do we stand? And so with that in mind, long-term career planning is almost a redundant thing. Now, you can still do it if you have the bells and whistles and you understand how trends work. But really and truly, it comes down to having an agile, iterative and adaptive play when it comes to taking advantage and opportunities in this ever-changing world. And this is why old advice is failing more so than none. Now, I'm not saying it's completely wrong to say, oh, you should stay in a traditional job X, Y, and Z, because there are millions, if not billions of people getting paid for a regular traditional job. So that would be false to say. But what I am saying is, for many of us, some of us watching this video, there are opportunities out there where you can actually do, let's say, contract roles or advisory roles or consulting roles, where it doesn't require you to sit down and do the whole 9-to-5 thing in a full permanent role, whatever it may be. Of course, there is a whole mindset shift which is required for that, which you can check my other videos in relation to contracting and consulting. But it does mean that traditional advice isn't the only thing that you follow, and this is why it's failing some people. I had a conversation with somebody over the weekend. Actually, it was actually this week. I say the weekend because it was a party, but it was during the weekday. It was a great time. Anyway, and they were talking about what opportunities exist out there for them to do some form of consulting independently. And I could answer the question right now, but I did essentially say to them, I was talking to somebody during the week. I actually went to a party, can you imagine? On a school night. And this person was basically asking, is there opportunities for her to do what she's doing as a consultant? And the clear answer was yes. But it's how you set it up. It's how you create that opportunity. It's whether there is a clear market for it as an independent. And so bearing all of this in mind, it's important to understand that when we're talking about the old way, the traditional way, you know, climb the corporate ladder, go to university, be loyal to your, you know, organization, etc., etc. That's true for some and still true for many. But how long could that game last for? You're more likely going to get more financial rewards and or the thing that you're looking for if you move. And okay, granted the current conditions right now, that's difficult for many to do, but are you truly doing anything differently from what you were doing before? The rules are the same, but it's about standing out differently at the moment. And that sometimes comes down to doing the basics extremely well, because really and truly, what we were being told before, again, has changed. It's completely changed. And this is why people have the opportunities to carve and create their own path. This is why people are going into independent consulting and setting up their own contracts, etc., etc. But is it possible for you if this is something you want? And to be honest with you, based on everything I've said, working harder is not enough. And of course, the other response is, okay, you have to work harder and smarter. Yeah, we know that. But how do you get smarter? That is the question. And to answer that fully, it comes down to being clear about the environment that we're in. That's where the strategic element comes into play. And so if you understand the market that you're in, and how you can provide value, then the smarts and the hard work can be combined. Now, if nothing happens, if you don't take any action, what does that look like for you? Well, it's quite obvious. If you don't take any career development, if you don't develop new skills, then what ends up happening is you start to plateau and actually your skills become erased, actually pushed to the side. So it may have had this much value, okay, but then now it has this much value, and so less people are looking for your skills. So it becomes harder to switch jobs because you haven't been able to cultivate newness and freshness based on what the market wants. The market always decides. There's also this whole idea of insecurity and anxiety. There was a LinkedIn article developed by Shilpa Sajana, hopefully I've said that right, in 2024, speaking about AI anxiety. And there's this whole idea that if you are constantly faced with this increased threat of technological advancement and AI taking over, you start to develop this chronic stress because there hasn't been anything done about it, or at least there doesn't feel like there are solutions to overcome these stresses. And so you start to get stress, you start to get increased job insecurity, you start to get this sense of anxiety as well. I mean, the other thing to state is, if you are not prepared in the right place at the right time with the right things with the right people, then what ends up happening is you've missed opportunities. And so if you're not preparing yourself. You've missed the opportunity, you've missed the boat. People are obviously playing around with some of this stuff. Now, of course, on one end of the spectrum, there's the whole AI argument. On the other end of the spectrum, there's the whole trade argument. Trades are going to go up, okay? Plumbing and brickwork and all of that kind of stuff there. And of course, there are things in the middle. Leadership is going to be a thing that is needed in the right guises, as long as you have the right expertise to man and or manage some of these digital devices and or bots and AI stuff. So with that in mind, what opportunities are you missing by not taking action? And finally, there's going to be this sense of erosion of confidence. And so with that in mind, it's like, because you're not doing the thing that the market wants, you're not going to feel as confident, because you're kind of like, what do I do? Or even if there is an opportunity to do something, you're almost like, I don't even feel ready to embark on this stuff because it feels so far gone, and we don't want to be in that space or place at all. Now, of course, it's very easy to feel all these things, but what if you could spin it? I'm always trying to spin the opportunity. So this is me not dismissing any of these feelings, but it's saying that in spite of how I feel, what can I do? It's difficult right now because we're getting even competitive. Me even speaking on this stuff, let's say for example, this video got a lot of traction, which it probably won't. Then, you're in an opportunity where there's there's increased awareness, which means there's more competition. So yes, people will be more competitive, but it comes down to action that's taken and how quickly you do something with the right level of quality. So spinning how we're feeling negatively based on our current environment is most important in terms of what action we take. So in 2025, it was Deloitte who said that skills are the new currency within the workplace. Skills. Now, I wouldn't quite say it's the new currency, however, it's important. So having the right skills is going to be key. You typically get the World Economic Forum and other sort of like independent organizations and bodies release what skills are required for the following year. And so with that in mind, it's important to have your finger on the pulse when it comes to this stuff. Embrace this change and unlock your potential by skilling up, or at least tracking and recording what you've done before so that you can articulate that in the right way. I've spoken about the PAR model so many times: problem, action, result. And this is where those opportunities come into play when it comes to presenting yourself well for new opportunities. I've already covered this point already, but the point we made is you need to be really clear about the skills and competencies that you have that are valuable to the marketplace. So there's some work to be done about knowing what the market wants, but also understanding what competencies you can provide that creates value. So leaning on some work done by the World Economic Forum and McKinsey, here are some things that you can think about when it comes to those specific type of skills that you need to be thinking about. So when it comes to these first two, we've got analytical and critical thinking, and we've also got creative thinking and problem solving. And so really and truly, this comes down to being a great problem solver in the right way. How do you look at information, complex information, in such a way where you can break it down and dissect it and then piece it together in such a way where it's useful for decision making? When it comes to creative thinking, it's not just about logic, it's about, can you look outside the box? Is there even a box in the first place? And what different unique ways can you help to solve a problem that is creative by nature, that is different, not for different sake, but because other means hasn't necessarily got you to that point. So yes, we'll have AI and everything else, but AI is going to be vanilla. Technology is going to be vanilla. It comes down to the expertise and experience that you have and the nuances of the human spirit and soul that allows you to have that context, to have that nuance. Even if it's a small addition, that small addition may be enough to make a difference. So the next pillar is navigating change in technology. So the first one is AI and technology literacy. So look, you don't even need to be a coder anymore. And some coders may be like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, of course, coding is still really important. Of course, coding is the reason why we're at the place we're at right now, and you can't take away from the nuance that it provides, but the gap is closing. And what I mean by this is AI can teach people, and if people have the right pattern recognition, to get to a stage where they can build their own applications, they can fix code on a website, whatever it may be. And so having that savviness, using these tools to develop your AI literacy and all of that kind of stuff there is going to be key. And really that is, to me, prompting well. Prompt engineering is a science, and really that science comes down to speaking to the generative AI as if it was a human, giving it the right sort of context, structuring things in the right way, making sure there are no assumptions when you are prompting. These are all things to think about. When it comes to adaptability, resilience, and agility, I said we're in a changing world. So your ability to quickly do things, do you have templates, frameworks, documents? Do you have the right prompts and engineering? Do you have the right tools that can spit out outputs and or outcomes quickly, but with the right level of quality in the right way? And so this is where tooling becomes important, and you're set for the right things for the thing that you're trying to provide value for. And then there's curiosity and lifelong learning. So it's everything I'm saying already. If you're taking in this information, if you're watching this video, this is the form of learning, because it creates that awareness in order for you to then take action, i.e. the self-management piece. So is there things that you need to learn in terms of your discipline? For me, that would be program management, change management, portfolio management, all of the above. Then there's the technological side. Maybe I want to learn more about Microsoft Azure or databases, or even the AI element. It's not just AI. Maybe I want to know about blockchain. There are different things in which you can jump into or fit yourself into a certain domain, so that you're in a place of strength because you have confidence in your competencies and the things that you're developing. The third pillar is all about connecting and leading with humanity. And I think this is the bit that is always missed. And this is broken down into emotional intelligence and leadership and social influence. Now, of course, leadership and social influence fit neatly into the other half of emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence? It's your ability to interpret how people feel and how they respond to how they feel. And so when we think about the popularized model made by Daniel Goleman, you have self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management, and in the middle you have motivation. If you understand that model and follow that to a T, i.e. self-awareness, how do you become more self-aware? You journal, you speak to different people, you do 360s, you take on critical feedback or constructive feedback. How do you self-manage? You practice, you get a coach, you speak to a therapist, you go exercising, you do all these different things. Social awareness, what is that? That is understanding how other people interact with you. And so this is observing people's cues and behaviors and what they say, and responding a certain way. And this is the social management element of things. Leadership, negotiation. This is also how do you again manage resilience amongst a difficult situation with other people. But when you have the motivation element, i.e. the willingness to want to do these things, this is when your emotional intelligence is at its peak. And so those who have a high degree of willpower, so to speak, are more likely going to get a better sense of EQ or emotional intelligence in their lives, thereby making them a better leader. When I think of leadership, and my definition of leadership is living by example. So if you're living a life of example that somebody else can willingly live also, and I'm not talking about accolades and shiny things and all that kind of stuff there, then you are showing leadership qualities because people want to follow you. People want to do what you're doing. You have natural influence. And so when you think of leadership, think of living by example. Now you may be thinking to yourself, do these different skills actually make a difference? Absolutely yes. And this is why you're scratching your head potentially, because you're potentially thinking about these hard skills. When I say hard skills, I'm talking about project management, business analysis, all this kind of stuff there. These are all important. But what I've seen in my profession, whether this is coaching people, speaking directly to the executive and or directors, is that it's the softer skills that people care about most, and that's what produces the most value. 70 to 80% of what you will do is always going to involve some sort of person. Even if you are mainly needed for a role and or job or to make money, how you react around other people, whether that's your family, friends, colleagues, whatever it may be, is key. So developing what they're calling softer skills, and I know people don't necessarily like that term as much these days, is still very important, if not more important, given the fact that AI is taking over the harder skills. So we're leaning into the more human element of things. And so my experience, your observations can clearly show that this is key and this is important. Now, of course, the key takeaway is that the world is changing. It's changing very rapidly. And of course, with this change, if you're interested in understanding how you can really follow a checklist to understand how you can navigate into this gig economy, into contracting, into independent consulting, then make sure you click the link below so you can download this contracting checklist. And just in case you're interested, this is the topic title for next week. Stop applying for jobs, do this instead. Now, I'm not going to say you necessarily have to not apply for jobs completely, but we'll leave it till next week to discuss it in a bit more detail. And of course, I'd love to connect with you. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and all of the other socials. If you haven't subscribed already, you like this type of content, make sure to hit the notification bell and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. As a reminder, If you want to see more things centered around contracting, independent consulting, portfolio careers, don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, hit the notification bell. As always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.